And now switch to English. Back again. Please welcome our closing keynote presenter. She is Alana. She addressing is a gap in the inclusion of women in the board and her book takes at the lives of every woman following their careers in tech. What do their partners like and how are they navigating to ongoing stressors on an environment where they are in the minority? Do women feel like they are thriving in or just surviving? Are they satisfied or are they tempted to give it up? The adventures of women in tech, her key takeaways. Alana, stage is yours. Please check if you don't have any echo.
Okay.
From the main stage.
How do I sound? I don't think I do.
So I leave you. And
thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Alana Karen, and I am here to talk about my new book, Adventures of Women in Tech, How We Got Here and Why We Stay. But first, I thought I'd talk a little bit about me, just so you know my background. I've been at Google 19 years. I joined back in 2001, not knowing what Google would become or that I would stay so long. And part of why I've stayed so long is I've had 4 different roles. I started on the front line of our ads products, reviewing and approving ads and answering customer email. That turned into a full-time role in policy, what ads we accept and we don't accept. And then I ended up creating, over the next 10 years or so, a global team that created, maintained, and implemented policies for ads and other products. Around the 10-year mark, I moved on to Google Fiber, our ultra-fast broadband product, and I built out customer service and installs for them and did that for 5 years, and got to do another role in between, a transition role when I was helping people move on to other roles at the company. And now I'm in search program management. So I've moved around quite a bit. I'm actually in search infrastructure right now. And a couple years ago, I was thinking to myself, you know, I've been at Google a long time, and I believe careers are in phases. And if careers are in phases, what's my next phase? And I was reflecting, and I really do like to write. And so I gave myself a goal of writing more and sharing that writing on LinkedIn. And so I was doing that and sharing stories about performance feedback I've received over the years and what I learned from it. And based on that reaction, I started to see that people were really thirsting for these stories of people making their way through tech and learning as they went and sharing the challenges that they faced along the way. And I realized that I was kind of annoyed, actually, that when I looked around, I wasn't seeing stories of women doing that. I was often seeing books about women at the tippy top who'd made it to CEO, or I was seeing stories about people who were having terrible experiences in tech. And I felt badly for that, but I was just somewhere in the middle, right? Making my way through tech, figuring out how to deal with day-to-day challenges, figuring out my career moves. And I think over the years, I've sometimes felt very alone. And so once I had this idea for this book that would target or kind of address that need, what could we see if we talked with a bunch of women who were in that, over the years, that kind of movement from their careers, and what would we find? And so I've interviewed over 80 women looking for different backgrounds, different ambitions, different races, different life situations, different roles, both technical and non-technical, at tech companies. And also just how they describe and think of themselves, like all of those kind of differences, pulling that together, diving into kind of the pros and cons of being rare in tech, and finally what skills and support we need to really make our way through and navigate our careers here. And for this talk, I think I should really talk about three main things. One is the key takeaways around why we joined tech, because I found that very interesting. When I think about takeaways, there was something there that really surprised me. And then number two is the challenges we face, of course, once we're here. It's not all vacation and loveliness. And then the skills and support we need to move through our careers, and kind of what my key takeaways were there when we're often in very challenging environments or we're the only woman in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and go through each of those sections. And instead of doing one long reading from the book, I thought it might be fun to do a few, one for each section. So I'll let you know when I'm starting to read from the book and when I finish, just so you know what's going on. Okay, so to go back to that first point, why women join tech, I think what surprised me here was how common the elements were. That, like we had rehearsed, or like I trained women to all say the same thing, nearly all the women I interviewed hit on several key themes. One was around the opportunity in tech, and both the opportunity in terms of job roles and what they could do for their career, but also this ability to have broader impact and change the world. And then a second piece was really around the people. What, they really liked the people that they'd met in tech, the people who have big thoughts, big thinking, and just felt like there was a culture that they really understood and thrived in. And the last piece sometimes was often very practical, right? The roles could be better paying, especially if people had technical experience, and that was very, interesting to women, especially those who needed financial independence. I interviewed a bunch of single mothers, so people who were really relying on those higher salaries. So I have people behind me. Hopefully they won't make too much noise. So, I don't know why. Obviously throughout the years I've stayed and joined for those reasons, but I did think it was very interesting how common that was. And it also gave me a seed. It gave me an idea for why we stay in tech and why we leave. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so I'm going to do a reading now from the book. It's called, hold on, let me just tell people, hey guys, just be a little quiet because I'm doing a talk here. Thank you. Okay. So second, reading, the chance to change the world. Except I don't seem to have that one. Despite organizing myself a few times, I don't seem to have that one. Okay, well, I will read you an extra one later. Number two, the challenges we face. So, of course, as one woman put it, no one said it's going to be easy. And I didn't want to write a book where it just sounded all like, come to tech, it's lovely. So as I was digging in with women, I wanted to hear a little bit more about what they faced when they joined tech. Like, who feels like they had an advantage being a woman? Who felt like it was a disadvantage? When do you speak up? How do you speak up? Do you get tired of walking with a sign, as one woman put it? And digging into some broader issues we face as women. Things like having to be likable, which sort of society has entrenched in a lot of cultures, that women take care of each other. We always have to be likable. We take care of other people. And so navigating some decisions that other people seem to make naturally can be more difficult for women. The expectation that women will also help other women, which I think is tricky as we're trying to wrestle with our own careers. And of course, how we can have lives and families in the demanding world of tech. So this reading I know I have because it's up here on top. I'm going to give you an example from a section where I dig into that likability issue and what some women thought of it. You first. I think the most dangerous thing about the likability issue is where it might silence us when we should advocate for our careers. While we are thinking of others, it's still important to think of ourselves and respect our own needs. Annie loves being able to build things in tech. Whether it's products, processes, data sets, teams, or people's careers, you get to be in the unique position of building out a company from the early days and express opinions that shift how things are done. At the same time, she gives a strong message about prioritizing ourselves. On the other hand, and I think this can be especially impact women and other minorities, you have to put yourself and your career first. The startup or early stage tech company will generally not do that for you. Her advice is strong. If you want a seat at the table during a meeting, take it. If you have an opinion or information around a decision, voice it. Of course, I'm not saying you shouldn't be a team player or prioritize your work around company values and priorities. But within that structure, confidence and taking the initiative are rewarded in startups and early stage tech companies. Do that for your career and for your team, but also do that for taking care of yourself when necessary. Reese has come to a similar realization as she's navigated her career. I think I was an optimist up through my 30s, believing that the professional world is a meritocracy. She no longer thinks that's the case in a world as complex as ours when it comes to race and gender. Based on her experience, you have to learn that it's a game in which your actual capability is just a part of a much bigger equation. She thinks women could be susceptible of missing this factor. I do think that women, because we simply can be so capable, presume that's the key and that that's the factor. When she mentors younger women, she puts it this way: the job is not the job, and it's never been the job. This explains the gap between what you think your job is and what it might actually entail. For instance, there's writing emails or doing presentations to communicate your successes outwardly in order to garner recognition. That's the part of the job that's not the job, but that really is the job. After speaking with me about challenges of having a non-traditional background and now being seasoned in tech, I asked Jennifer T. how she's been dealing with those issues. Following the same school of thought as Reese, she instantly turned into an unapologetic woman of power. I'm very clean and clear about my boundaries nowadays. I got here by truly understanding my value and working with the best clients. These companies typically prioritize diversity in every capacity. They don't care if I'm a single parent and actually appreciate not only my resilience, but the professional experience I bring to the table. You need grown-ups in the room too. As a result of her firm approach, she feels like it becomes a normalized conversation where you're not having to apologize away your appearance or even that you're older. Instead, she doubles down on her leadership and communications experience with multiple organizations, nicely and consistently. Oh, how lucky are you that I've dealt with a nonprofit board before and I know what to do. So that is the end of that reading. So the last section is around skills and support. And interestingly enough, I was most nervous kind of entering into this crowded area of career advice and trying to offer anything new. You know, there are books out there about speaking up. There's books out there about how you find a job. And so it was interesting to actually kind of get over my own built-in insecurities to figure out how to address this section. And I kind of went back to the data to find confidence. So I saw repeated patterns in what the women were sharing with me and what they talked about, both in terms of frequency, but also the level of impact it seemed to have in their career. And from this, I came up with a list of 5 things that I thought were most impactful, and they're in chapter 8 in my book, but I'll list them for you briefly. So the first one is around resilience. And people have been talking about this more and more. It's around building the grit and the power to withstand adversity. The second piece is around marketing 101. And Risa talked about this a little bit before in the section I just read. Speaking up and feeling that we can promote our talents and accomplishments. Ask, which is something that I had to learn in my career. Having the confidence to network, to reach out, ask for help, and ask for what we want. Finding support, obviously hard to do. This is the 4th one. If you don't feel confident to ask, but seeking out those who will help us navigate our careers and provide a sense of belonging. And I certainly saw a difference in the women who I interviewed if they had found their people that they could use, even just a couple people that they could go to when they were trying to make decisions or deal with someone difficult at work or navigate a tough issue, versus the people who had to do it alone and sort of guess along the way. And so I hope you're using events like this to find people that you could use for that form of support. And then lastly, owning your awesome. And this was a really important one to me too, because I saw that along the way, over time, women figured out their worth. They didn't come in knowing it though. And often they second guessed what they brought to their company. And they thought they were just lucky to be there. Or maybe even the imposter syndrome crept in and they thought that they didn't deserve to be there. And it was over years that women felt and built up this sense that they were in fact awesome and worthy. And I wanted to try to accelerate that. I want to try to speed it up because I really thought that if we could feel that 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, think about that, how that would impact the workplaces that we're in. And when we would think we were worthy of a raise or a management role or a speaking gig. Think about how that would then impact others and the companies we're in and ourselves. So I'm going to do a reading from Find Support. It took me a while to realize I needed help, and I feel pretty silly about that in retrospect. I was a fairly independent kid, which converted to me being a pretty independent adult. I was the type of person who would pack up my own car and move across the country. I would then move myself for the next few years from rental to rental until I realized that movers existed and I could afford them. The first time I paid for a house cleaning, also years later, it was so amazing I thought I heard angels sing. Despite this, it took me forever to ask for career help and longer to really listen to the advice. I actually don't think I became a real pro at it until I started the process of writing this book, where it was clear I knew nothing and needed help from people who'd written books or were familiar with the book industry. Until then, I thought I should know it all and really only flirted with getting guidance or help. But ugh, I was falling into such a classic trap. If knowing is half the battle, the not knowing is the other half. From salary differences to promotion criteria, being in the dark keeps us from being able to achieve what we want, whether that's equal pay or the plum role. Finding support is one way for us to navigate that lack of insight or knowledge. That's why groups like Ladies Get Paid have sprung up to provide courses on everything from negotiation to knowing your worth. As I interviewed women, some sounded totally alone as they navigated their careers. They talked more about their worries and insecurities than the women who had found people to talk to share experiences with, and to bounce ideas off of. You all are getting the full taste of my home this morning. This is about how, that's actually usually worse, honestly, for it. Okay. Let's see where I was. Okay, so to share experiences with and to bounce ideas off of. This makes sense. Self-doubt can creep in when we're making decisions by ourselves, when we have no one to help us think about whether to take a new job or whether to ask our manager for a raise. In particular, finding a peer group to understand what's typical in salary or compensation analysis can be critical in terms of financial considerations. Support can come in many forms, whether through coworkers, training programs, or internal email groups. Some are outside of work, such as Lean In circles, women in tech groups on Facebook, or blogs. The phrase "found my people" came up more than once in my interviews, also implicating belonging in our set of needs. Whether networking at conferences, like this one, finding the right team, or joining a good company that matches our values, women often felt immense relief and satisfaction finding their place among others who understood and supported their path. The support we receive can also extend beyond job topics as women navigate the full spectrum of their lives. Often women are seeking kinship as working women with in-laws, children, and partners are asking for recommendations across needs for doctors, lawyers, and more. Finding each other. Amy can't recommend finding support enough, whether through colleagues or organizations. I like to build a support group around myself and around other people. There's always support out there. You know, there's 10 million women in technology, organizations, and summits. She gave the examples of Lesbians Who Tech, the Out and Equal conference, and Women in Technology Summit she's attended. She's also leveraged her college alumni network and Lean In circles, having launched Lean In within her company as well. I can't imagine how in the world anyone gets by without reaching out to others, reaching out to your network. She believes life is hard enough without leveraging each other for what's difficult or to learn from what others have experienced. More important, talking to other people can help you see things you might not and help you feel more confidence. So finally, I was interested in why we stay and why we go. I spent time talking to people and asking whether they'd ever thought about leaving tech and why. And I also sought out women who left to understand their story. News articles often make this sound kind of mysterious or extremely specific. So they'll often be like, why are women leaving tech? We don't know. Let's analyze this more. Or they'll give a specific reason, like motherhood or bad cultures at companies. I also found a fairly straightforward but nuanced answer. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, which is what brings us here is also what will make us go. If what brought us here is the ability for opportunity for ourselves, the ability to change the world, cultures that we really enjoy, if those things disappear or we go for years in a role or a company or changing companies and not finding it, then we risk losing women in tech. And it's in fact quite systematic, really, that people over time will feel that these ambitions that they had or these hopes that they had aren't happening and that then they're stuck. And so to me, that was then actually I mean, it's a weird to say, but actually kind of a relief. Because to me, that gives a list of something that we can do, right? As you're seeing women reach that point in their career, how can we help get them unstuck? How can we help navigate the things that are holding them back from why they joined in the first place? So I think that gives us a better roadmap for maybe how to tackle the concerns we have about women leaving tech than just feeling like we have to fix every culture or always blame motherhood, which can definitely be an issue, but isn't the sole culprit, or might be mixed with other variables for why people feel like they have to make a decision to leave. To end my book, I talk about a question that I asked women, a very simple question. If you could change one thing in tech, magic wand style, what would it be? And so to finish up, I ask you to think about yours. What would your thing be if you could change one thing about working in tech? I'd love to hear more. You can always visit my website at alanakaren.com and reach out to me. I think we're going to do some questions.
Alana, it was great. I heard a lot of things, and it strengthens me in the belief that what WITSEC doing, WITSEC doing, is the right one. We have to provide this helping hand, provide this information, share this kind of career experiences and so on.